Today in our Wonderful Day in the Lord broadcast, we're going to complete chapter 15 of Revelation. We're having a great worship service here just prior to the final judgments that are going to be poured out on the earth at the tribulation time, known as the seven bowl judgments. And they begin to take place in chapter 16. But prior to that, there is this worship service that we've been looking at. But now let's pick it up in verse 5 and see what happens. After these things I looked, and the temple of the tabernacle of the testimony in heaven was open. So we have a very unique thing happening, and John is experiencing as part of his vision. Remember there's two visions in this particular chapter. One has to do with the tribulation saints who have been victorious. They have not bowed the knees to the Antichrist, chapter 15, verses 1 to 4. And now we have this second vision that has to do with the tabernacle of the testimony of God in heaven. So we have a unique thing. We have virtually, John is getting to peer into the Holy of Holies in heaven. This had to be a frightening and awe-inspiring experience for him to see such a thing. And it's going to get even more impressive as we press on. Because in verse 6 it says, "And the seven angels who had the seven plagues came out of the temple, clothed in linen, clean and bright, and girded around their chests with golden sashes." So we see these angels now who are going to have these plagues, these final plagues called the bowl judgments, showing up. Now, if we could just drop down to verse 1 of chapter 16, it says, "Then I heard a loud voice from the temple," so here we are at the temple, "saying to the seven angels, Go and pour out on the earth the seven bowls of the wrath of God." And then they began to systematically pour out those bowls of judgment. So this is what we have. We have these seven angels now, and each of the descriptions we have of those angels concerning being clothed in linen, bright and clean, girded around with their chests with golden sashes, all those have shown up earlier and even later in the book of Revelation. So these symbolic things are the recognition of the cleanliness and the holiness and the purity of these servants of God. In verse 7 it says, "Then one of the four living creatures," now these four living creatures have shown up periodically throughout the book, including going back to the earlier sealed judgments. But one of the four living creatures gave to the seven angels. So it would appear that these four living creatures are superior in rank than the angels. They're kind of commissioning the seven angels. "And they gave to the seven angels seven golden bowls full of the wrath of God who lives forever and ever." So now, once again, we're seeing the wrath of God, a consistent theme in the book of Revelation, especially chapters 14 and 15 and 16 here. The wrath of God is going to be poured out. And all it says about God here is that he's eternal. He lives forever and ever. And then it says this, "The temple was filled with the smoke from the glory of God and from his power, and no one was able to enter the temple until the seven plagues of the seven angels were finished." So we have now this temple in heaven, this tabernacle in heaven, and we find a scene that we find in other places of Scripture that I want to talk about tomorrow, and it's filled with the smoke of the glory of God. So this goes back, I think, to what the Jews called the Shekinah glory, the presence of God, his glory, so magnificent it was like smoke, and from his power. And as a result of that, no one was able to enter the temple. So whoever might have been in the temple, other angels or the four living creatures or whoever, are no longer able to be there because the glory of the Lord is so manifest that they cannot stand to be there. And they're not going to be able to be there till these final judgments, it says, are poured out on the earth. So the judgments are coming from the temple, so they come directly from God. They're poured out following the worship service in heaven by the angels and the tribulation saints. And now they're being poured out in chapter 16 upon the earth. And until they are all gone, all poured out, then no one is able to enter the temple. Those judgments, as we'll look at next week, are poured out, I believe, very quickly, one right after the other. I don't think there's great periods of time between them. And they're poured out very quickly. And as they're poured out, the judgments of God are poured out on the earth, and the they're removed from the temple, and then apparently these angelic beings can now enter the temple and the worship of God. Now, what we want to look at tomorrow is the fact that this particular type of experience has happened several times in the Old Testament, and we want to look at that and see the similarity and the connection. The original readers of this chapter understood these things. I think we should too. So you follow us tomorrow, and you have a wonderful day in the Lord.